day, everyone. So, before we start our lesson for today, our topic or our discussion or lesson for today is assessing student learning outcomes and modern educational practices. So, our table of contents are assessing student learning outcomes, shift to educational focus from content to learning outcomes, authentic assessment tools, process and product, performance-based assessment, and domain of learning. So, our objective for today, by the end of this lesson, the student will be explain what is assessing student learning outcomes are, discuss the difference between process-based and assessment, and introduce the Bloom's taxonomy and the domain of learning. So, our learning outcomes explain the student learning outcomes, discuss the difference between process-based and assessment, analyze how the student design assessment to target all domain learning. Ms. Pilapil will discuss our first topic, which is the assessing learning outcomes.
Good day, class! Our first discussion is all about assessing learning outcomes. But before we proceed to our discussions, we will not read the presentation but will discuss and explain what is the context all about. But before we proceed, let's define what is assessment. Assessment is the evaluations of progress of individual of our student. But assessment is important to have a clear missions and core values for us to able to align everyone in organization and ensure that everyone are working towards for a purpose. One of the assessment is the goal-oriented process that should reveal how the student have learned what we want to them to learn. That assessment learning objectives need to be closely aligned to our missions and core values. One of the assessment is that focus on student activities that will still be relevant and approach, and also to determine the student ability. That assessment is deliberate collections of evidence to student learning-based outcomes. Furthermore, the purpose of assessing student learning outcomes is to determine the progress of each student that evaluates student performance. On the assessment instrument, what are those the examples of assessment? One of the example how to determine the progress of each student is the assessment or exam, quiz, or performance, so that the teacher can determine their student meet their goals or a clear objectives, reflect on why student did or did not master the learning goals, the development strategy to help them to be more successful in the future. Assessment learning outcome is the monitoring and evaluation of a learner progress, achievement. That those assessment is the feedback to improve learning. To be able to understand or deep understanding, assessment can help us to understand which student learn best under the conditions such as knowledge to improve learning. That assessment work best to improve through series of activities. It may be collection the performance of each student to the point is to monitor progress towards attains goal and continuous improvements. But before we know the progress of our student is to determine their goals or their development. First, we need to evaluate our student to gain more knowledge and more learning. The second slide is all about the three methods of assessment. So first is the cognitive, second is the psychomotor, and the third is affective. Those are the three methods of assessment, but later on, Mr. Phil will discuss what are those assessment methods. But an assessment of learning outcomes, it is the knowledge or skills and ability that the student attain at the end or as a result. So that's the assessment of learning outcomes. Our second presenter is Miss Omar.
Now, let's proceed to the method we use to assess the learning outcomes. So, first is the text and quizzes. So, this method are the traditional assessments such as the multiple choice exam, short answering questions, or the essays are the commonly used to measure the student mastery of context knowledge and understanding of the key concepts. So this method can help every student to measure their knowledge, but not also in their knowledge. This method they measure their strength and weaknesses. The next method is the project and presentation. So this method is assigning project, research, paper, presentation, or the portfolio that allow every student to demonstrate their ability to apply their knowledge and conduct research, and also the communicate effectively. So every student, this method can help them to have potential to speak in public and sharing their knowledge to everyone. Okay, the next method is the oral presentation. So this method is the student present their words or the research to the class or in small groups to assessing their communication and public speaking skills. So this method is helping student or every student to boost their confidence to speak in public. Also in recitation, student also can share their ideas and thoughts. So the next is the peer assessment. So this method is involving students to providing the feedback and evaluating each other work. So this promoting collaboration, communication skill, and critical reflection. So this method can help students to know if they are listening or they are focused to the discussion. Next is the self-assessment. So this method can encourage students to reflect their own learning progress. They can also set their goals and evaluating their own performance so that they can develop their metacognitive skill and self-awareness. So the last method is the reflective journal. So students can keep a journal of their thought. Also, they can keep their opinions and insight throughout the course. So they can assessing their own self awareness and reflecting thinking. Now, let's proceed to the next presenter, Miss Humadla.
Now I'm going to discuss the traditional content-focused education. Traditional education, often referred to as content-based education, focuses on delivering subject matter and the acquisition of knowledge. Students and teachers typically follow a predetermined curriculum that includes lectures, textbooks, and exams. It is focused on delivery of specific content such as textbooks, lectures, and homework, emphasizes the transmission of knowledge and information, prioritizes a wide range of content often without considering the relevance or importance of each topic, often focused on memorization and information rather than critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Now, let's proceed to the outcome-based education. So, outcome-based education focuses on the outcomes or results that students are expected to achieve rather than just the content being recovered. Outcome-based education is a model of education that rejects the traditional focus on what the school provides to students in favor of making students demonstrate that they know and are able to do whatever the required outcomes are. So that's the outcome-based education. Now, let's proceed to the next topic, which will be discussed by Mr. Christian Abike.
So our next topic is advantages of student outcomes. So when we say clarify and directions, the learning outcomes clearly define what is learners are expected to know, to do, or to value by the end of learning experience. This helps both instructions and learners to stay focused on specific goals, right? Next is the student-centered. When we say student-centered, so the learning allows students to actively participate in their learning. In a student-centered classroom, the focus of activity is the student. This means that learners are encouraged to participate in a series of tasks including speaking, listening, writing, and collaboration with students. Like for example, letting students determine the final result of a project or assignment instead of dictating the student what the final project should be, right? Next is the observations. So measurable or observable progress. So a statement that clearly and precisely describe what the learner will know and be able to do by the end of the course, right? Next is the better assessment. So better assessment, it is focused on the learning outcomes that be more authentic and meaningful assessment, such as a presentations or project rather than our traditional multiple choices, right? Or multiple choices test, right? So we provide some example of how this shift can be implemented in classroom settings. So this is our examples. Our next presenter will be Miss Jaira Umar. Thank you for listening.
Now, let's proceed to the authentic assessment tools. Our evaluator method that requires students to demonstrate their knowledge, skill, and ability in a real-world context that closely mirror the tasks and challenges they would encounter in professional or everyday settings. So, these assessments are designed to assess student application and learning in authentic situation, promoting the transfer of knowledge to practical and relevant scenarios. These are the assessment tools. First is the portfolios. So every student, they present their works, finding to the audience, demonstrating their ability to communicate complex information. Second is the project. So students work on real world problem or the scenario, and they can demonstrate their understanding and skill through the final product. So the next assessment tools is the journal. So journal can promote introspection, critical thinking, and self-expression. So the last is the real world problem. So this task assess student abilities to think critically, analyze information, making decision, and solve complex problem in practical context. So the next presenter will be Miss Dakita.
Process-based, focus on thinking, problem-solving, and decision-making skills used to complete a task. Evaluate student learning and understanding through observation, self-assessment, and peer assessment. can be more subjective and dependent on teachers' judgment. What do you think is the example of process-based assessment? These are the example of process-based assessment. A student create a documentary film about a social issue, conducting interviews, researching information, and crafting a narrative. The emphasis is one of the process of researching, analyzing, and communicating information, rather than just presenting a finished product. Product-based assessment is an evaluation method that focuses on the final outcome or product created by students as a measure of their learning. Emphasize the application of knowledge and skills to produce tangible results. Specific guidance, tasks, and rubrics that serve as a framework for assessing student performance. Rubric, in particular, provide a clear set of criteria and a standard for evaluating the quality of the product, ensuring consistency and objectivity in the assessment process. This is an example of product-based assessment. Students create a documentary film that explores a social issue, interviewing experts and individuals impacted by the issue. They must research, writing script, film footage, and edit the final product.
Okay class, now I'm gonna discuss the benefit of using performance-based assessment. First is more accurate assessment. When we say accurate. Now, performance-based assessment measures students' skill, providing a more accurate and presentation of their abilities than traditional multiple choice of tests. We all know that a multiple choice is the assessment to accurate the skills and knowledge of our student. Next is enhanced feedback. When we say enhanced feedback, is the performance-based assessments provide teacher with rich data on student strength, weaknesses for them to provide target feedback and instruction. When we say enhanced feedback, it is the teacher provide a students know the strength and weaknesses for them to provide a target of their knowledge and their instruction to make them feedback their progress. Last is the improvement student motivation. When we say improvement, we improve our student when it comes knowledge and learning. So when we say improve student motivations, it is provide opportunity for learners, students to demonstrate their knowledge, skills in a meaningful way, increase their motivation and engage of a student. This is the motivation. We engage our student to being a motivate to their knowledge and educational purposes. It's also we can provide assessment to their opportunity to build their skills and more knowledge when it comes our cognitive, not only for cognitive and also for psychomotor and affective. And that's all the benefits of using performance-based assessment. So I hope you understand those are the three performance-based to know what our students have learned and to improve their knowledge. Okay class, I hope you understand my discussion. Now let's proceed to our last reporter and she will discuss the domain of learning.
And now let's discuss about the 3 domains of learning. But before we proceed to our last discussion, allow me to introduce myself. I am Kyle Mitch C. Torifel, and now I will discuss about the 3 domains of learning which are very important for students' critical thinking, decision-making, and physical skill development. And now, the first domain is the cognitive domain, focuses on remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, and evaluating. It talks about how students think and learn, which is critical for problem solving, effective communication, and understanding the world around us. I realized that it is difficult to understand the world around us and figure out how to handle difficult circumstances if our cognitive abilities are weak. The second one is the affective domain. This domain is mostly concerned with receiving, responding, valuing, organizing, and characterizing. Affective domain also concerned with our attitude, values, and feelings. It influences our social interaction, moral decision, and societal contribution. living a meaningful life and forming healthy relationship. And the last domain is the psychomotor domain. Psychomotor domain learning that talks about perception, guided response mechanism, and adaptation. The psychomotor domain is a center around motor skills and coordination. It enables us to perform action with our bodies. For example, is the playing an instrument, participating in sports, or even just elegantly writing are a few examples. That's why if we're having a good psychomotor abilities, it will help us to enjoy physical activities, express oneself creativity, and carry out jobs efficiently. And that's all. Thank you for listening.